All right.
or something to that effect. Again, the independent review will help determine that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So none of the 48 violations had to do with water quality.
Correct.
But they might have had something to do with not doing reports on time, so it inflated the number that shows up on the column there.
Correct.
And when you look at it compared to everybody else, you're like, well, what's the deal?
Yes.
And it may have been a reporting error, and that could be a human error as well, something else that might come out in the independent review.
Correct, yes.
Okay, all right, that's explained. Another popular question, why no outflow monitoring in place that would have detected problems well before any citizen complaints?
Sure. Well,
Why did people have to discover I've got
Sure,
diesel fuel
yeah.
coming out of my faucet?
I'll have to review that. I mean, that's a highly technical question. An outflow meter, I'll have to review whether that would be something that would be, an added benefit. But many times we rely on people to let us know that there's a problem in any system. They report to us. And thank goodness that occurred. And we were able to deploy people to those spots and begin to see whether there was some kind of a spill or something that was on private property. We began to flush and then determine it was back on our site. But that'll be another thing that we can look to our independent review on, whether deploying outflow meters would be something that would work in this situation.
Okay, is that something you are looking at?
Sure.
What's the best way in layman's terms to explain why some people smelled the strong odor of the fuel? Personally, I never smelled it, tasted it, or had any hint of it. What's the best way to explain why that happened to some people and not others?
Well, I think it has to do, and this is unscientific on my part, Richard. I live about 1,200 feet or so from the water treatment plant. I live in old Germantown, and I did notice the smell on Thursday myself at my house. I think diesel is a pretty pronounced odor, and people notice that. I think it had to do with proximity. It also maybe had to do with where you sit in our water system as far as the lines. It may determine by the elevation of your property. All those things could have led to it. Now, once the flushing began, as you could imagine, we were beginning to flush all of that out of the system, and so that was releasing more odor, as is explained to me. Matter of fact, before we were able to find the crack in the pipe where the diesel that had leached into the soil that then made its way into the pipe, into the reservoir, when we began to empty the reservoir, we were literally pulling water from the ground into the pipe, and so we were putting more diesel into the system. And until that was fixed and then that dirt excavated, it'll be replaced by dirt that they will consider clean or licensed dirt. We were able to really identify the problem and then flush out the entire system. So some people were picking up, I would refer to this more as like post odor, because it was getting to them later in the process from the flushing.
Okay, and it was in removing that dirt that was soaked with fuel that may have compounded the problem?
Sure, yes,
okay.
yeah.
And you actually moved it in a way that was closer to where the hole was?
Well, we have, with our partner InSafe, which is our mitigation contractor, we have excavated that dirt, moved it off-site. It'll be disposed of properly because it's no longer, it's contaminated dirt and soil. And that'll be replaced with new soil and then backfilled. The leak has been repaired as well. So that has removed the diesel spill from that area. And we'll continue, once that entire Southern Avenue plant, which I hope will be taken out of commission when our Eastern Tower is up, we can continue to even do more review of that area as well.
So you mentioned you being 1,200 feet away from
Sure.
the area. Is that generally what you found, is that the farther the circle got away from the treatment facility, the less you heard complaints of diesel fuel?
Yes, we've taken, and we have monitored and we have recorded all the complaints really from about 2 days after the crisis, or from the beginning of the crisis on, and we've GIS mapped all those. We have, now these are various, and so a lot of them are duplicates and triple, but we've had about 1,200 or so people that have called out of 41,000. And so we have mapped those areas, and then we deployed during the flushing and the cleansing and testing process. We would deploy to that area. Regrettably, some people would think, well, no fire hydrant was flushed on my specific street. The engineers would determine where the fire hydrant was best for that neighborhood that had more piping, drew more water. They can probably explain it in a more scientific sense at our town hall meeting on Thursday. But when we flush the system, it would pull some diesel in some area, and of course you're letting the water out, and there may be smell on that as well. We have very, very few phone calls as of today, Tuesday.
Germantown may say the water is clean, but there are still an awful lot of folks who don't trust it, whether they smell diesel now or not. And they wonder what Germantown can do in the way of providing home testing. They mentioned things like strips, where you would normally test for pH levels or something that would be able to assure them that their water is safe.
Well, we've been going literally door to door with our firemen to anyone who calls and has further notice of odor or any kind of discoloration. When we flush the entire system, as you can imagine, we have unsettled settlement in the system, and so some of that is getting flushed out. In essence, it's not desirable, but it's another way of cleaning the system. And so anyone who detects anything, we are making literally house calls, and we will specifically on a case-by-case basis with our firemen. We've even done airborne testing for diesel as well at people's homes. So we'll troubleshoot on a case-by-case basis.
What if they're not smelling any, but they just don't trust that, there isn't
Call
something
us.
in it? Still
Yeah,
call?
Call us, yes.
Okay, and you'll
Yep.
send somebody out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
How long was the water unsafe before citizens were notified of the emergency?
Well, the calls began to come in Thursday morning post 9 o'clock. We immediately deployed to those areas where people smelled an odor. I think around 10:15 that morning, our Public Works Director called TDEC and put them on notice. So we self-reported all of this, and we self-disclosed all of it. We immediately began to contact our partners that would assist us in being able to understand how to handle a leak, a spill, or contamination. Once it was determined where the sourcing was, that's when we declared a state of emergency. So after contacting TDAC, putting them on notice, literally within an hour we put that notice out, declared an emergency, and then we had a press conference at 4 o'clock on Thursday.
That's when the first phone call, though, but you don't know for sure how long the water might not have been safe
No.
before you get that call.
That is
it just
correct.
an impossible
That is
thing to
correct.
come to a conclusion on?
Well, it could be determined that Wednesday evening when the tank was being refueled at the generator, there was that period of time from Wednesday of the previous day to the Thursday. So, yeah.
That was the start of it all, was the refueling.
Correct.
Yeah.
But we would not have known that's what led to contamination at that time.
Did that worker pass along any concern or, hey, I goofed up in the refueling here? Was that passed along Wednesday night?
Well, fairly, it's in due process right now. As a matter of fact, our insurance company, or the insurance company for the city, Public Equity Partners, is conducting their investigation on that. And I do have to respect the due process part of it. When it's concluded, we will fully disclose that.
Okay. And you also hear frustrations about not seeing the maps that you spoke of earlier about where there were more concentrations of a fuel leak, not seeing the I don't know how often you did testing, hourly, daily test results during the crisis to see where there might have been a problem and how much of a problem there was. Is that going to be released at any time?
Yeah. We will, matter of fact, we will, it's got to be put in a spot, whether it is in a link in a folder with context, but we'll share all the test results. We'll share mapping. We're not hiding any of that by any means. In the crisis portion of what we're doing, we're trying to get our water system back up. And as a result, we're deploying assets to meet all of these different calls. And so in real time, we're collecting that and putting it in our system. That was the thing that led to a lot of frustration. We would have loved to share more information, but at times it was flush, collect samples, test, wait for testing, reporting, and then tell the community pass, fail, and then we could release the actual test. But I guess the priority and the focus was to get the system back up.
Now, you said you would have done things differently, but you only had 2 news conferences
Sure.
during the crisis, and a lot of people have said, well, why not have a daily, 1 p.m. news conference,
Sure.
pick your time, here's where we're at, answer whatever questions reporters have and the public might have, here are the test results as we have them for today, this is where the goal where we need to be, and just be more communicative along
Sure.
in the process.
And it's very fair, if in hindsight, having more, I guess, access to not only the media, but to our residents probably on a twice-a-day basis, mid-morning and maybe late afternoon. Once we developed a rhythm of knowing when testing would come back, and you got to remember, our testing facility, we inspired them, and the person who owns it's a local resident, we inspired them to ramp up their ability to turn these tests quickly without cutting any corners. And so, as we picked up our rhythm of the crisis, we were able to give information out more readily. And we did so with videos at times because, no offense to your profession, Richard, but when you run a story, you only have a certain amount of time to share information with the community. We thought it would be better to answer frequently asked questions, put that all out there. And matter of fact, our 2 o'clock press conference we had on Monday, we recorded that so that we could share it with the community in its totality, and that people could hear the questions answered and the questions asked and then the full answer and not a small portion of the answer. And that's kind of the way that, and moving forward, we would probably look at a communication plan much differently, but we would probably incorporate some of that where we would have media access and put out information via video and those type of things, just so we could get more information out.
Yeah, I mean, for more than one person, the YouTube videos didn't cut it. I wanted to see more news conferences, I wanted to see them more frequently, and I wanted to see them in full and in their entirety. So you
Sure.
did do that on the one.
Yeah.
I guess, had you done that
Sure.
twice a day,
Yeah.
every
Well,
day, that
and-
would have
yeah.
been.
And I hope that this exchange that we're having, that you'll share all of it with our community at some point in time. Yeah, those things are fair assessment. We also got a lot of feedback that people appreciated getting that information in a video format, undistilled and direct.
Okay. What do you say to a guy like Kyle Miller? He's quoted in a lot of places, but he's disgruntled, I think it's fair to say. He says he wants to move. You can't live in a place where you don't trust the drinking water, is what he told NBC.
Sure.
What would you say to someone like that?
Well, I mean, Kyle, we're going to get your confidence back. We're going to bring you the water that you deserve and that you expect. And I would be glad to come to your house and talk to you, or we can meet. One of the things that I pride myself as a local hometown mayor is, you hear from me. I've returned every phone call, every text, every email during the last 12 days. And having conversation with leadership is important. You can't achieve that in a big city. And so I offer that to Mr. Miller and anyone else that would like to take me up on it.
Are there any of these test results or maps that you can provide for us today, or is that something that's going to be developed
I'll have to check with
at
staff.
the town hall meeting?
Yeah,
Or?
I'll have to check with staff. I'm not sure if it will be ready as soon as today.
Okay.
But we're working and efforting toward making all that readily available.
Will there be, I don't know, handouts or something to that effect at the town hall? What are you hoping
Well,
to do to let
we're
people-
still working on that. It's in progress. We might provide a QR code to a link. That way, people, of all ages are on their phone. And then we'll see on whether we can make that as a material item to hand out as well.
Any other things I haven't asked you about that you want to make sure you
Well,
get out there?
and I appreciate the amount of candor here. I appreciate you asking me every one of these questions, and I appreciate being able to talk to my community and literally look them in the eye and tell them we've got a long way to go to get your confidence back, but we're going to do it every second of the day moving forward, and that's important to me as a mayor, and that's important to the 430 employees at the city, and it's important to all the people that volunteer in this city. We have 25 boards and commissions, and they're part of our team too. And so we all want to be able to provide the Germantown that people moved here for.
So to summarize, you would say, agree perhaps, that the 3 things you wished hadn't happened was, number 1, the power hadn't gone out. Number 2, there had not been the overflow and refueling that led to the leak. And number three, once this did surface, that the city had been, and you had been more communicative about what was going on a regular basis.
That's very fair, Richard.
Okay, all right, very good. I can't think of anything else. We've got reversals, so we're good there. I guess we want to head to the facility and have
wanna
you
do
kind
that?
of, if you can, do kind of a show and tell of, here's where this happened.